Hi everyone, and welcome back to my channel. I'm Sara, the Hype Goblin, and this week I'll be doing a Dungeon Master Roundtable. A few nights ago, I sat down to talk with Fred from How to D&D.
Hi, I'm Fred Weller, and I run the How to D&D YouTube channel. You can find me on Twitch, and I don't really use Twitch, but I use Twitter and I use Facebook, and I apparently have a Discord where you can actually talk to me.
Taron from Indestructoboy.
Hey, I'm Taron, Indestructoboy Pounds. I do a lot of game design focused stuff over on my channel. I am the designer of the Merchant, Dancer, and Runekeeper classes over on the Dungeon Masters Guild. I'm also a musician and music educator. So yeah, come check my channel out if you're into homebrew design, you wanna kind of up your game and make your own character options for D&D, come hang out.
And Jordan from Flutes.
I'm Jordan. I'm with Flutes. You can call me Flutes. Flutes started out as a website blog that my wife and I made. She goes by Opal, and we just wrote about anything D&D we felt like. It really was just a blog, and then it grew, and then we made a YouTube channel. But she has a gift for making formulas for magic items, and she has a great article and video about how to craft them. So if you're ever wondering how to make magic item crafting more interesting, definitely go to her video or join our Patreon to get on our Discord and get unlimited access to us. That's us. Check us out.
Our entire conversation lasted a couple hours, and I know none of you want to sit through that, so I did cut it down into 3 videos that I'll be releasing this week and over the next 2 weeks. So without further ado, let's go ahead and roll that intro and get on with the questions. Let's just get into it. With the rise in popularity of actual play content, more DMs are looking to take their games public. What sort of things as a DM do you consider for a streamed or recorded game that you wouldn't consider for a casual home game?
I almost think like do a session 0 as I guess that's kind of like marketing yourself as this is going to be a mature stream, like mature topics are going to come up and whatnot. But also just kind of letting the audience know like, hey, this is what we're potentially going to bring up. I mean, that's always important, but like, I know also, I'm sure Matt Mercer can probably attest to this. Be prepared for the insane amount of rules lawyers that are going to call you out if you don't have absolutely everything memorized. It never fails. I always see like after like a Critical Role stream, there's all kinds of people that are like, well, if they had just gotten this one ruling right, this person might still be around or, whatever. What sorts of things as a DM would I consider for a streamed or recorded game? I'm still not really sold on the idea of like personally streaming a game. And I think that's in part due to like, I just prefer the real like in-person interaction over online play. It's a reason why I haven't really done anything with my Discord about running a game. But I guess just, you've always got to let your audience know like what they're in for. I guess is my big thing with that. Mm-hmm. I guess any particular rules, nothing really comes to mind that I would do differently for a streamed game that I wouldn't already be doing at my home game.
For me, it's there's already the gorillas in the room when it comes to streaming D&D games, and it's already kind of gone against the mold. I don't know if any of you ever watched that anime Sword Art Online, but there's a line in there where it's like, no one likes watching an RPG, and it's like a big reveal in the story. And I always think about that when all these people are watching people play D&D, because it's people watching an RPG in a sense. It's not like the grindy video game style, but what I mean is we're already like not likely to watch people play RPGs because they're long. There's a lot of investment to like get into the story, and there's already some big players, like Dimension 20 and Critical Role, and a few others are just massive, and they have very high quality of streams. So I always think like, okay, what would it take for me to do a stream that wasn't just for fun? Like if I wanted people to watch it, I feel like I would need to have a group of friends where we are all very close and understand each other, and we have a very similar sense of humor. and we definitely know what we're getting into and we're like committed to it. But also, I wouldn't even touch it if I didn't have production value of some kind. Like, I struggle with good lighting, good cameras, and when I think about running like cameras for all my friends and having all their microphones and then like trying to add it, it's just there's a lot to it. And I don't mind so much the length of it, because if I watch it on YouTube, I usually speed it up 1.5 to 2 times depending on how slowly people talk, so that's not really an issue for me. But I need a really good group of friends, really know what we're talking about, really have good production quality, because if we really want people to watch, there's only so much time in people's lives, and some of the gorillas already take up a lot of time. That's what I think.
Well, like, kind of building off of that, I was just going to say, like, mentioning the long form kind of a thing, right? Where you are kind of committing to like 4 hours to watch the stream. I'm kind of wondering what the thing is that's going to come along that's going to sell D&D as short form content that people can take in for like 1 to 2 hours, rather than, I mean, I guess Adventure Zone did that in a certain capacity, or like Harmontown,
yeah.
But I think even like Acquisitions Inc. is still like, aren't they like 3 or 4, sometimes 6 hour long games at like PAX and everything, But I do kind of wonder if there's going to be something that comes up that sells the actual play as short form content, rather than the kind of like 4 to 5 to 6 hour, this is what we're used to D&D being like whenever we play it in person. We're going to sit there for 4 hours with our buddies and eat pizza, right? Like,
yeah. I kind of wonder if eventually, because when I stream games, which that's my main shtick, is I think of pacing when I'm DMing, and I know the other DMs and I do, they get kind of paced out differently than when you're in a home game, and you can sit and you can talk to the same shopkeeper until, the DM gets bored and says, okay, we're done, we're moving on. But in the stream game, you have like specific pacing, and usually there's a break involved. So you hit a climax right before the break, and then you hit another hook at the end to draw them back for the next episode, similar to a TV show. And I'm wondering if, like you said, if there's a way to make them short form where maybe you do have that really long 3-4 hour long stream, but you set the pacing so that maybe as an audio cast or as broken up into chapters in a later upload, you can have maybe just an hour long portion so people can stop and start without having to sit there for 4 hours, because it is a time commitment, and I don't know why people do it to come watch me. Honestly, I'm happy they do. But it's one of those things that's just like, I never thought I'd ever sit down and watch people play D&D, and then I started doing it, and now, gosh, I don't know why they come watch me.
I mean, you got to admit, like, I mean, a big seller point, like, I'm sure we're going to be constantly talking about Critical Role in particular here for the actual play thing. But I mean, what really sells Critical Role is the fact that the entire cast is extremely charismatic. I mean, they work extremely well together. And there's a chemistry that's there that's not going to be with every single group. They've been friends for over a decade now, working in the industry together, and not only that, but they're all, trained actors, voice actors, and so they've got a background in improv, and this plays into that like Matt Mercer Critical Role effect, right? Not every table is going to be like Critical Role. Not every actual play is going to be as you're not going to have the they have the star power that's built into there as well, but like there's a skill that comes with that my buddy my buddy Tyler Thrasher, that's an artist that we play D&D with, he's not he doesn't have the background in improv that someone like Taliesin Jaffe does. He doesn't do a ton of voices or anything, but he does sound effects and whatnot. So yeah, he DMs differently, but we still get the same feeling out of it. So I think going into it with the expectation of it being that level of production, there's a uniqueness that comes with Critical Role from just who's involved with it that makes it got it to where it is today. I think, at least.
So I do actually have some experience with this, and I'm going to be completely honest. I personally don't like watching Dungeons and Dragons games or role-play games. It's kind of against what I was trying to do in the first place by starting a YouTube channel, which is to get people playing the game. I would much prefer them to play the game rather than watch the game. And when I used to run public games in game stores or in a cafe or wherever I selected, people coming up and wanting to watch us play, it used to get on my nerve just a little bit. I just wanted them, look, don't watch. Just, I'll give you a character sheet and we'll give you some dice. Just play with us. That's sort of my my headspace. But I have done live stream on Twitch. It's really expensive and hard to do well, and there's a lot of setup involved, and I really was not capable of doing it well. And I have recorded games, again, very complicated, very time consuming, considering what you're doing. But my biggest problem is not the know-how, the expense involved with all the gear and setting everything up and having a space for it. I mean, it's certainly going to be easier with something like a Zoom call, I guess, because you can just record the Zoom call and then just do whatever else later on. So that's a lot easier than having multiple cameras in your lounge or in a cafe or a game shop where it doesn't really work because there's people moving around. But I found it's my players, because I used my friends, and my friends are not me. I decided to be on YouTube, they didn't. So as a result of that, they've made it quite clear that they're quite capable of making it entertaining. That's not my problem. But it's all the swearing and inappropriate comments, and it comes from the men and the women. So they spare no expense for humiliating me and trying to figure out how to ban me from that platform. So I don't ever do it and will never ever do it again, because nothing that they come up with would be appropriate for the public. Mm-hmm. Now, if we have nobody watching, it's a lot tamer. If there's somebody watching, they'll put on ears, and
just saboteurs.
Yeah. I've had issues with that with people on my channel and when I've been on other channels as well playing the game, and it's definitely something as a showrunner, even when you're not the DM, if you're just running a game for someone, you definitely have to be like, hey, like, there's a code of conduct that you have to follow when you're in this space. Like, you can't just say whatever comes to mind. It is still improv, but it's improv with limits because you're providing a piece of entertainment at this point. And, you know, I run a mature filter on my channel. My channel's 18 and up, but I still have my own personal limits of, you're only going to take the bit so far, and then I'm going to throw down the X card and it goes behind a veil. So, I totally agree. That's managing personalities is one of the hardest things that I think showrunners and DMs on streams have to consider.
I mean, what are your opinions on kind of the backseat gamer-ishness that we tend to see? I mean, at least I've seen in quite a few live streams that just number one, not really want to engage with the chat, because the chat just seems like this person should be doing this, not and like, I mean, I get it, like the munchkin kind of lifestyle. You know, some people, that's what they love out of the game, but it's like, I don't feel like, I guess there's just like a different sort of feeling whenever you're playing on a live stream and you see like people getting upset that you didn't do a certain thing rather than this, and I'm like, I guess it's just kind of a norm for any gaming live stream, but it sounds like I've heard more complaints about it in the TTRPG sphere than it seems like in video games.
Yeah, I mean, there's a bunch of rules lawyers, and I'm very fortunate that the long running game on my channel is with a lot of veteran DMs. I am one of the greenest DMs at that table, so I think the way that we talk about rules with each other kind of directs chat on how it's appropriate to talk about the rules with us. We do occasionally get the backseater that says, hey, shouldn't you have? And we'll just say, yeah, I probably should have, but you know what? In the moment, I completely forgot because I'm human. But thanks for the reminder. I'll make a note of it. I mean, people are going to backseat you when you're playing, like, they'll backseat me when I'm playing Fortnite. They'll backseat me when I'm in the DM seat. They'll backseat me when I'm in the player seat. Ultimately, it's just one of those things that it's human nature for a lot of people when they have the right answer, they perceive that they have the right answer,
right?
That they need to let you know about it.
Yeah, that they have to say it, right?
And I think the way that because sometimes like we will speak up at the table with one another and be like, actually, that's not how that spell works. And we had this in our very last session. A spell was being used incorrectly, and my friend who DMs the campaign for us was like, okay, we'll let the way we played it stand. Next round, play it as it's supposed to be played. And I think seeing us do that rather regularly, because I mean, I don't know about you guys, but I don't know every single rule in the book. We just treat each other with respect at the table, and our chat reflects that. It's very much chats on Twitch are very much a reflection of the people who are on stream, in my opinion. So you attract what you attract based on your own behavior. But yeah, very rarely do I have to kick someone out of chat.
You know what else I think is part of it, Taron? Is, and you've been trained as a designer, like, you know, like you use InDesign and stuff, right? Like, I don't know if you've ever worked as a designer, like career-wise, but my wife has. And it's maddening having people critique your work in kind of bad faith when it's all subjective in like a creative endeavor. If someone's playing Hearthstone or something on a stream where it's like codified and someone in the chat can say, oh, misplay, you should have played this card first. It's usually like oh, that's true. That would have been a better thing. And it's like logical.
Yeah.
But in D&D, it's like something in between, where there's like the codified rules, but it's also a creative game.
Right.
And so I think people feel like they can chip in like the rules and like the codifying of it, where video games usually do it themselves. No one has to go into a Hearthstone stream and say, oh, you didn't start with 1 mana, you're supposed to start with 1 mana, because the game just does that, you know? And so it's like in between like that creative sphere and that codified sphere that I think just brings up a lot of animosity between those like two ways of thinking. I think that's why they collide. I think that's part of it.
That's fair. And I think there's that. I guess to ask this question is more to like get into the heart of why rules lawyering seems to be a mentality that appeals to people in a negative sense of it. I don't mind corrections on things 100%. If like, I'm going to assume the thing that's beneficial to a player whenever I'm DMing, right? But, you know, whenever I'm designing, there was even a screw up I made on stream where I was talking about the rules for dodge, and I had mixed up the rules for dodge with the rules for half cover, where you get advantage on dex saves and +2 to your AC, versus advantage or attack rolls against you have disadvantage and advantage on dexterity saving throws. So one, mix up there, and I was like, wait, you're right. And actually chat criticizing me helped out with the design process, but to anybody that says that they know absolutely every rule, of course not. Are you kidding me? We have other lives outside this game, and having gospel knowledge of all the mechanics of D&D, you're gonna forget, you're gonna slip up. The heat of the moment, you're gonna do something like, oh yeah, dodge means +2 to AC, whatever. It happens. It's okay. It's a game, that's always my, like, it's fine. Yeah.
So to give you an idea, I have done a lot of rules, basic rules on Dungeons and Dragons 5e on my channel. And so I get a lot of comments, and any time I've made an error or omitted something, or I didn't put enough information in there for them, I get pounded in the comments. Now, you think that'd be bad enough because those are edited videos, but see, I'm stupid, and I decided it would be smart to do live tutorials with miniatures and maps and dice.
Oh no.
Yeah, exactly. Now, imagine that you're hot, you're sweaty, you're dealing with lights on you, an hour's passing, your voice is starting to crack, your mind is kind of going everywhere, you're trying to keep a track of the chat, and you're trying to keep a track of what you're supposed to be presenting to people while answering questions, and you make a mistake with what you're supposed to be doing with the miniatures and the dice, right? You know what the rule is, but at that particular time, it sort of just eluded you. Now, it might not be that you forgot, you just voice it wrong or demonstrate it wrong. And then you realise, like, later on, oh, whoops, I made a mistake. It's like that, seriously. When you're live, there's going to be mistakes. And people who think that you shouldn't make mistakes when you're live, you're asking too much.
Yeah.
That's always been my opinion. I've experienced the full force of people's opinion with regard to the rules for Dungeons and Dragons since I was stupid enough to do tutorials. I very rarely do them now. And that doesn't mean I won't do it again because I haven't gotten smarter. I've just gotten braver, I think. So you make mistakes in live streams. So you people, the audience has to accept that. And if they can't, well, it's not going to change.
Yeah, I think anyone who beats someone up for making a mistake while live on Twitch or some other broadcast, that you have no experience on what it's like to be on a live broadcast, obviously.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. We want to move on to the next one?
Sure.
All right. Let's rock and roll. There's a lot of discussion about how players can create well-rounded characters these days. As a DM, is there added pressure to up your NPC game?
I think so, because I'm also a player, and there's like a meter in my mind whenever I interact with an NPC where I can say to myself, I've reached the limit of how much the DM prepared for this NPC and how far it's going to go. And so then I when I reach that limit, then I'm going to oh, okay, let's move on, And maybe that's fine, but I think when I'm DMing, it makes me think, okay, I don't want my players to ever know when they've reached the depths of what I have for an NPC. I want it to always seem like there's an ocean below that iceberg, And so I don't see it as pressure just because that's my personality, but I do think, if I'm being honest, I think that is like a growing expectation of players for their DMs to have like really interesting, fleshed out NPCs. That's what I think.
All right. I can see that.
I mean, my thought on this is that I think that this is mostly a discussion that's being had in specifically hyper-interested TTRPG circles, not exactly like my buddies I play D&D with on the weekend, right? Like, they want to have a character that has a fun... And I've certainly had these kinds of, I'm going to submit a novel of a backstory for this character that I don't know is even going to make it through 4 sessions. Like, I've definitely had those kinds of players that come to the table. And I'm, rather than like upping my pressure on my NPC game, I'm more about like, what can I do to reinforce that kind of backstory you want to tell? Usually for like the pressure on my NPC game, one of the things actually, it was that Ted Sikora said in his review of my merchant was he loved using this class to populate his NPCs, to make it an NPC merchant that would travel with the party. And the party, I mean, I was immediately like, you know what? That's such a good use for this thing. And that's why I went and made the NPC stat blocks in it, because that alone was like, yes, this is not just it's not just like a fun character class. It is a great DMPC class. Now, I know a lot of people that seems to be like a taboo thing, but I think if the character is built strictly to support the players and make the players rock, then like they're, that can be another way to actually like endear, your players to a character. Not just, can you give them a witty piece of dialogue? Can you make them fall in love with them? Whatever. It can be like, like in the case of my dancer is going to give the characters additional actions in combat. How much fun it is whenever players are like, I can take another, wait, what? Like, that you want to endear a player to an NPC, make them want to keep that NPC in every single combat situation, so I think the pressure doesn't seem to really come from my players at all. I mean, sure, there's them, like maybe 2 or 3 of them that watch a lot of like D&D news or whatever, but I mean, in all honesty, I run beer and pretzel style tables, like I might be a designer on here, but like I don't really have a lot of players at my table that are thinking like, following everyone at Wizards of the Coast and a bunch of other designers and personalities on Twitter, they're mostly just, we like playing D&D together, you know, and I roll up the NPCs as they seem to come with it and do what feels natural for how we've always run the game. It seems to be pretty fun so far. So yeah.
What about you, Fred?
Well, it's not really. I don't really find the pressure at all. Maybe later, when I started, but not really now. And it's not just pressure. I just don't care at all. I don't give a toss. And I think one of the best things as you get more experienced as a dungeon master is to realise that all these techniques that you learn are nothing compared to not giving a toss. Is actually one of the best pieces of advice you can possibly have. Is just not worrying about nothing, because ultimately in the end, it's not like you're dealing with saving the world from starvation or asteroids hitting the planet or anything like that. So it'll all be right at the end of the day. I do a lot, or have done a lot, of NPCs in great depth on my channel for the Lost Mine of Fendelver, which where I almost did every single NPC. And so I've already got a lot of tools and ways and strategies for doing that if I want to. Not every NPC in my game is highly complicated. Some are, some aren't. And I cheat. I can... So, well, look, the player's handbook has got all the things I need to cheat with. So if I've got a name, well, there's the name generator. If I can't figure it out myself, that's fine. We've got that bit of it. If I want to pick a race, well, that's not too difficult to do. And considering most adventures seem to be full of humans, I'm not very fond of them myself, but I just use the characters' backgrounds. I just pick a background from the player's handbook and there we go. They're one of those. Yes, that's a hermit, that NPC. And then I just go through. I don't even roll the dice. I just pick the one that I like and stick that onto my NPC, and away we go. The only other thing I've got to do is give them some motivations. Maybe world motivations, maybe a motivation that's only related to the player's characters, so there's not an awful lot that I need to worry about because all of it's going to be done for me. And if I can't figure it out that way, then I just use my imagination, because apparently that's Dungeons and Dragons, right? Or I use Rory's story cubes.
Yes.
Sly Flourish, head on it. If you're going to make NPCs and you don't know where to go with this, getting some cubes with a whole lot of images on them and just rolling 3 or 4 of those will give you ideas for what the NPC can be like. So that's all I do. That's it.
I was looking for my DM toolbox because I've got those story cubes in there. But have you also seen the NPC generator dice by Citadel Black?
No, I haven't. I've seen AJ Pickett's dice that he managed to convince some company to make, which are based off the old RPG dice. But there's dice out there that do those sorts of things. But I like the story cubes because you can get a variety of them, and they're really not like an answer. They're like a spark, like a seed.
Yeah, they're like a suggestion. I think I have picked up a set at a estate sale somewhere. I don't know where they went, but I have some like that, and they're big and chunky, and I haven't even thought to pull them out since I bought them, but I might now. That might be how I create my next NPC. We'll see. Yeah, I don't.
Like you say, it's just you just need a prompt, and then you can build from there. I don't know how well you guys have watched my channel or whatever, but. I've been an improv performer for 10 years, so it's really easy for me to just someone say cheese, and I make an NPC off of that. It's just one word. It's if you roll dice or whatever, any sort of inspiration, prompts can go a long way, and it really takes the edge off to just build from a single concept or quirk.
I have a whole list of people that I've run into. Well, not necessarily run into. They don't know that I've run into them. I eavesdrop when I travel or when I go to the grocery store, and I carry a little notebook with me. And I have a whole list of people who have they're now in my stories, whether they want to be or not. I personally don't put much pressure on myself when it comes to NPCs as a DM. I know some of my friends do, but I'm I'm just trying to remember how the trap works that you're trying to unlock. The NPC who's with you, they're my last worry right now, honestly. I want to remember, like, which room is the big bad monster in?
That list sounds like it would make a pretty killer D100 table. I'm just saying.
Probably. I should probably start typing it all out. There's a lot there. There's
the lady wearing 30 hats one day, and
I was on a plane, and the most recent one was I was on a plane. I was on my trip to Florida, and there was a woman behind me, and I was just catching snippets because I had just gotten Mistborn, and I was reading that, and I was just like really into it. But I started hearing snippets of this conversation behind me about her talking about her and her fiance. They were buying a house, and I was like, oh, okay, that's normal. And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, she just goes, oh yeah, and all the ghosts talk to me, and I'm just like, we're gonna close the book, and we're gonna listen. And it was the most bizarre conversation that I overheard, but you know what? It was, she equated it to, I forget what, there was some popular TV show that she equated it to, and I had to sit there and listen, and I was like, this is a character. This is someone who's going in something someday. And I started taking notes.
Sarah, that's exactly what improv performers do.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I have a Google sheet of just ideas of characters, and then when I started playing D&D more, I just shifted it over to my D&D prep
I love it.
documentation, and I just sometimes if I'm running a one shot, I'll be like, oh, what are some fun NPCs, and I just pick 3 from the list. It's a great way to do it.
Yeah, for sure. All right. Okay, so to further this question about NPCs and us as DMs, what's an NPC that's been in one of your campaigns or in a one-shot that you didn't expect would become a big deal to your players that they latched onto?
Did any of you play the first Baldur's Gate game on the PC?
Mm-mm.
There was this NPC named Noober, and his whole thing was he just went, "Heya," and he runs up to the party, and because in that game, if an NPC talks to you, it like makes the camera go to like the NPC talking to you, and you're stuck on them for the conversation.
Mm-hmm.
So he would do that to you and just be like, "Hey, do you guys like cheese?" And then you'd be like, "No, go away." And you try to walk away, and then 5 seconds later, he's like, "Heya," and he runs up to you, and he puts the focus on you again, and he does that again and again, and it becomes obvious based on like the things you can say to him that the designers of the game want you to kill him because he's just going to kill you forever. He just like won't leave you alone. So I decided to actually use him in D&D. And to this day, people I played that game with are still like, "Heya," sometimes when they're just like trying to like mimic him. So that was one that I really enjoyed from Baldur's Gate that worked really well.
Love that.
Fred, you want to go?
Sure. I have 2, but I will only tell you one unless you drag the second one out of me. Jub Jub, which is, I was using Jar Jar as my sort of mainstay for this one.
Oh, no.
But with a much worse horrible twist and take than Jar Jar, because Jar Jar just didn't go far enough. So I decided that I needed to make a character that was bizarre, annoying, and also incredibly weak and useless. So I decided Jub Jub would be an old troll who's lost their teeth. So when they're talking, when you've got no teeth, it's actually quite difficult to actually form words and so forth. It takes a bit of practice, right? I actually managed to figure out how to actually do an accent for it, which I could not maintain, and I'm not going to try to do it now, for sure. It had a walker, so Jub Jub had a walker, because he had a limp, damaged leg. His regeneration had stopped working. He was so old, it wasn't working anymore. He was kind of falling apart here, there, and everywhere. He had a lisp, and he was unable to digest meat, and so he had to live on fungus and mushrooms and vegetables because he didn't have any teeth, right? It had to be soft, so to actually consume anything. So that was the character. My players, I thought this would be a good character. My players decided that Jub Jub needed to join the party, and And then they had to figure out how to get this troll with a walker through this cave where there's pools and places they have to climb. They had to haul this old troll up cliff faces. And
Don't worry, old man. We'll get you home.
Oh, wow. They turned your campaign into Up.
Well, kind of. But it got worse because once they got through the campaign and they dealt with the major troll king, some of them started to think that I had laid a trap for them in Jub Jub and were convinced, even though he was part of the party, he hadn't done anything, that he was in fact the mastermind behind everything, who was controlling everybody like pawns. So Jub Jub, I have half the party trying to save Jub Jub and half the party trying to kill Jub Jub because they're absolutely convinced that Jub Jub is like a mastermind villain that they need to destroy and that is responsible for everything that's been going on and been spying on them the whole time. Yeah, that worked really well.
Wow.
I was, I mean, one in particular for my home game, like homebrew world. No NPC really came to mind exactly for my homebrew world, but the one that, like, as soon as I saw the question, I was like, just to talk about this character, I know that you all have experienced this character before if you've run Sunless Citadel, Meepo the Kobold. This is a character that, like, has had his own mini that sells for like $300 on, like, if you can find it anywhere, because like they made one run of Meepo. And anyway, so in Sunless Citadel, there's a really fan favorite Kobold NPC called Meepo, and I was like, why this character in particular? So I ran Sunless Citadel twice. Ran it in AL and I ran it for just a home game. My buddies wanted to go through a mega dungeon, and a larger dungeon, I guess you could say. Sunless Citadel is pretty huge, but so they get up to that point and it never fails for whatever reason. It's just, I guess, the events of whatever is leading up to Meepo. I'm trying to say it without any spoilers. All the events that are leading up to this character's personal endearment, I guess. There's because every DM is going to role play this kobold different, but this kobold is set there in the dungeon. But it never fails. All my characters love it. And I can't think of anything that I did to follow a guideline or anything in there other than the character that gets sparked from Meepo being there. And it was like, I wonder why it is this character and not the NPCs that they're saving, the villain, anything like that got them so hooked on it that, like, no, this is our baby boy. We are protecting him. And I think that's there was like an interview with Chuck Palahniuk or something where he was talking about one of his inspirations was someone he was having a conversation with who was the inspiration for the book Choke. And he said, like, horrific main character because they're an emotional manipulator that gets people to take care of him by making them think that they saved his life. And he was like, that's the easiest way you can convince people to care about you is to have them save your life. And I was like, that is such a sociopathic way of thinking about that. But like, I mean, I guess we can pull it off in D&D a little bit where, like,
yeah,
we put our NPCs in danger and the players save them. And then they immediately think this is a thing I need to protect. Like this is now it's sudden, easy endearment points, right? Or maybe that's what it is with Meepo. He's a tiny kobold that is sad. I don't want to like spoil anything. Anyways, but yeah, maybe just like they have this thing they need to escort, right? Like, we're helping you out, buddy. We're the big, whatever. And that just endears them to the character, I guess. I just thought that was fascinating. Like, it's not even a character that I created. It's one that they put into a pretty famous dungeon without a whole lot of prompts. And for whatever reason, what would that be? 14 out of 14 players I ran it for love Meepo. And I don't know.
I'm glad you said that, Taron, because I like to play Dota. I don't know if you ever played that, but there's a geomancer named Meepo who's basically like Kobold-ish.
Really?
And now I think that's where they got the name, because I also made in full circle, I made a Kobold character. I named it after Meepo, and now I find out the original Meepo was a Kobold, and I'm like, oh, that's funny, because I started to see other people naming their characters Meepo, and I was like, do they all play Dota, or is this from something else? So I'm glad you cleared that up for me.
Yeah. Wow, yeah, I mean, because Sunless Citadel's been around for decades, and I mean, yeah, okay, so famous enough of a kobold to...
Yeah, I mean, as we were talking, I looked up the date of Sunless Citadel. It was like year 2000, and Dota's Meepo came a little bit later. I bet it's the same Meepo.
That's funny.
In spirit.
I'm gonna write that down. I'm gonna go look up the developers, see if any of them are tied to D&D.
Right.
Where'd this name come from? We need to know. Yeah, I have yet to get players invested in any NPC that they want to take along with them. I did, however, have them decide to, instead of killing everything in the dungeon like they were supposed to, unionize everything in the dungeon.
Liberate these dungeon dwellers.
It was my very first time DMing, and I DM'd the Rick and Morty dungeon. That's supposed to be like the classic like hack and slash, like you just kill everything. So I was like, oh, this will be fine. There won't be a lot of role playing. I had to role play all 30 goblins in that dungeon because they decided that they were going to, instead of pick a fight, they were going to get out of it by saying that they were the dungeon inspectors, and they wanted to know if they were getting union breaks, if they had adequate bathroom accommodations, what were the safety standards, are they getting a 30-minute lunch and 2 15s? What's their holiday pay like? And so I had to, and they all have the same name, but like I had to role play 32 goblins named Jerry, and they unionized the entire dungeon, and then became leaders of
Bernie.
No, because are you familiar with like the Rick and Morty world?
Yeah.
All of the goblins are named Jerry,
Yeah,
and they all hate Jerry.
Gotcha.
Jerry's the worst. Oh my gosh, have you met Jerry? But they're all spelt just slightly different. But there's so many of them. Yeah, that's the. I mean, it's kind of like they kind of adopted the whole dungeon. But yeah, they unionized. Hey everyone, thank you so much for hanging out with me today. I had a lot of fun putting this together for y'all, and I'm really looking forward to releasing the next 2 videos for you. Be sure to like this video and leave a comment so that we can keep the conversation going about the topics we covered today. Have a wonderful week, and I'll see y'all on the next one. Bye.
Streaming Elden Ring as soon as that releases. So I'm sure, Sarah, are you hopping on that train as well?
I'm trying to talk myself out of it, but I'm going to lose half of my gamer squad to it. So I think that by default, I have to play if I want to still see them.